Philadelphia, 1971. American politics were changing rapidly, and the right to peacefully protest was a closely held value of many progressive groups. Philadelphia had been established as a hub of politically active young people, many of them with left-wing ideals that went directly against the conservative Nixon administration.
Because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Bill Davidon was among them, a physics professor at Haverford College and an outspoken anti-war activist. He was involved in protests upon protests, the Second Freedom Ride, and eventually draft office raids, in which draft information was stolen and destroyed as protest for the Vietnam War. Standing up for what he believed in was nothing new to Davidon. Due to his involvement in these group protests, Davidon began to notice a strong fear toward the FBI. It seemed that informants were in every peace movement group, creating large-scale distrust within these organizations. Knowing of this espionage wasn't enough, though. Hard evidence was needed to prove the FBI's political involvement under Director J. Edgar Hoover.
Never before was there a greater need for unity.
The only way to produce this evidence, he decided, was to take it. Davidon called 7 others to propose this plan. Keith Forsyth, a fellow peace protester with lockpicking experience, was the first. Then came Bob Williamson and Judy Feingold, as well as John and Bonnie Raines, a married couple with children. They all decided that they were willing to risk everything to expose the FBI. The group, self-titled the Citizens Commission to Investigate the FBI, chose a low-security office in Media, Pennsylvania. They had no idea if the information in that office's files would be helpful, but they were willing to take that gamble.
No, J. Edgar Hoover was a bad man, a very powerful man, a man that was feared by the press, feared by the presidents. He had a free ride, and we knew it, and we knew the only way we could expose him for what he was to get his own files.
On March 8, 1971, after months of planning, they broke into the office and took every file. This was the same night as the fight of the century between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, which they used as something of a distraction. After sorting through hundreds of the stolen files, the burglars struck gold. They now had mounds of paper evidence proving the FBI's attempts to create havoc within dissident groups. Nearly all of the groups being investigated by the FBI were part of the peace movement, and the tactics used, in Forsyth's words, were not only immoral, but illegal. Wiretaps without warrants, reading through mail, anonymously telling college professors to take a stance against social change groups. These were just a few of the actions described in the files. None of these groups were suspected of any criminal activity, and the FBI had no legitimate reason to be recording their communications and watching their every move. Hoover, the director of the FBI at the time, simply felt that any dissidence in the country was a threat and should be eliminated, even if that meant suppressing the First Amendment rights of individuals with a different perspective.
After we sorted the files, we learned that only about 40% of the files had anything to do with crime, and 60% of them had to do with surveillance and intimidation.
Violation of First Amendment rights.
The Citizens Commission anonymously mailed copies to the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Los Angeles Times. The latter two returned the documents to the government when asked to do so, but the Washington Post courageously published these materials on the front page. From there, it became a media explosion. Many different perspectives on the issue emerged, but the 8 burglars had completed their mission: to let everyone in the country know what the FBI was doing behind closed doors. The Citizens Commission to Investigate the FBI cut off all communication with each other as to avoid suspicion. An FBI manhunt with over 200 agents began, laced with intimidation tactics such as veiled threats, anonymous phone calls, and destructive home break-ins without a warrant. This lasted for a full 5 years, but the media burglars were never apprehended. In 2014, 7 of them came forward to claim responsibility for the information leak. However, the Citizens Commission only opened the door into the FBI's political involvement. The true magnitude of their unchecked surveillance was not revealed until Carl Stern, a journalist, uncovered the COINTELPRO program in full. During the media explosion after the burglary, millions read the FBI documents, but Stern picked out a single acronym regarding the quote-unquote new left, COINTELPRO. He requested a copy of the files for this acronym repeatedly, each time being met with immediate denial from the Justice Department. Finally, Stern took the case to court and won. The FBI would have to hand over any and all paperwork regarding COINTELPRO, which stood for Counterintelligence Program. After much delay, this program was revealed in full. 50,000 pages of field reports, surveillance files, and mission assignments. Stern took a stand for the freedom of information and exposed Hoover's FBI for its unconstitutional actions under the COINTELPRO program. After the media burglary, Hoover said this should be smothered immediately. When the COINTELPRO files were made public, however, there was no chance that the FBI could smother the country's reaction. The full reports made the media files look tame in comparison. These dossiers detailed attempts to make Martin Luther King Jr. commit suicide, spread fear within the peace movement that there was an FBI agent behind every mailbox, and intimidate dissident groups into breaking up. University post office workers were contracted to read through mail, and switchboard operators were told to monitor the communications of Black student union members closely. All of these actions taken by the FBI undermine the fundamental constitutional rights of Americans. Previously, no congressman was willing to prompt an investigation into the FBI. Hoover was known for keeping files on all of them as blackmail. But this massive amount of extortion and blackmail being exposed to the public sparked the first ever federal investigation into an intelligence agency. The government would finally have to step up and watch the watcher. The COINTELPRO program was shut down immediately, and the FBI was suddenly thrown into an era of massive change. Their power was put in check, and supervision of the agency's actions began. COINTELPRO was the first domestic surveillance program revealed by whistleblowers, and it set the precedent for both how the press and the government would deal with information leaks in the future. Like modern whistleblowers, the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI was made up of activists willing to risk everything: their freedom, their careers, their families, in order to do what they felt was right. They took a stand for the First Amendment and transparency in government, which led to massive changes in the FBI, as well as the country's perception of Big Brother. This issue is still highly relevant today. As recent as March 2017, more files have been leaked to the public about the CIA's domestic surveillance capabilities. The media burglary was critical in developing this country's stance on the freedom of information. It ultimately unveiled a completely unconstitutional conspiracy on the part of the FBI, and brought about huge changes in the relationship between the government and its intelligence agencies. The 8 people that orchestrated this release of information risked everything in the process, solely to stand up for what they believed in: freedom under the First Amendment.
The government will always try to overreach, use its power in ways that protect itself from the citizens who supposedly they represent.